Thank you all so much for coming. Welcome to FACT. My name is Maitri Maheshwari. I'm the head of program here, and it's a real honor to be moderating this conversation. We've got wonderful speakers in person and remotely, and yeah, this is the first time we've done a live event like this in a year and a half. So it's very exciting for us. It's very exciting to have people back in the building and attending things. But we're obviously still very much affected by COVID. So our two speakers are joining us remotely because of COVID reasons. I wanted to kind of start by giving a little bit of context about why we're here today. Probably about 10 months ago, I had a conversation with artist and filmmaker Bafakoto, who's here with us, about a project that he wanted to do marking the 10th anniversary of the riots that took place in 2011, that started in Tottenham in North London and spread across the country. And Baf wanted to work on a project that was really looking at what's happened over the last 10 years, and also thinking about how the coverage of that period really framed an understanding of not only young Black people in the country, but also really changed the shape of how technology affects our understanding of social protest and organizing and community organizing. The project Uprise is accessible through an AR QR code. There's a poster on the outside of the building, but there's also QR codes around the city. The events of 10 years ago were sort of triggered by the police killing of a Black man in Tottenham. And while the media represented the events with a sort of sensationalized menace, and they were very eager to sort of portray all the young people involved as looters and vandals, the inequalities, the decades-long inequalities and disenfranchisement that sort of lay at the heart of a lot of that anger, which had also been further exacerbated by government austerity. None of those things were really explored or discussed in the media at the time, and they continue to remain largely overlooked. In Liverpool, Toxteth became the focal point of that rebellion in 2011, as it had been in 1981 and numerous other points across the 20th century, starting with the race riots of 1919, and also coming right up to date last year with the Black Lives Matter movement. And that obviously was in response. Black Lives Matter has been a sort of very active movement in the US, but it sort of made a sort of global leap last year in response to the killing of George Floyd in America. So what we wanted to do today in terms of this conversation was really to think about not only how the tools and technologies have evolved over the last decade since 2011 to really help the individuals who are shaping kind of culture and protest and organization, community organization, how the tools and technologies are being used by all communities today, not just to kind of give visibility to the issues that they're facing, but also to kind of change the narrative, to kind of rethink representation. We have great speakers. I'm hoping that I'm going to be doing very minimal talking, and our wonderful speakers are going to be doing a lot more. I'm going to ask them all to introduce themselves, and then I'm going to start us off with a question, and then we'll see where we go. We'll probably talk for about 45 minutes and then turn over to you guys for more questions. So I'm going to start with alphabetically as I've got it. B.
Hi. Yes, my name is B. Freeman. I'm a producer-director, independent producer-director. I've been involved with film and documentary filmmaking now for the past 25 years. In particular, one of the things I do most is document the Black communities, and I've been doing that, as I said, since the 80s. Also been involved with films as well with BBC, Channel 4, worked at the Afro-Caribbean unit for a long time, also was part of the Black on Black series, looking at the political programs. I was also commissioned in I think it was about 1985, to make a film on the 1981 riots. And again, we're talking about changing the narrative, and their perception then, when they wanted me to make that film, was, young Black youth, smoking, dope over a billiard table. But what we did, we changed the narrative on that film, and we shot the film. Sorry.
I want to do intros, and we'll come back to this in a second.
Okay, right. Okay, sorry about that. So that's my involvement. Most recently, I've just done a film on the Windrush called Daughters of the Windrush. I was one of the members of the first Black Media Workers Association that was set up in the late 80s, early 90s, to enable young people to get into the media, in front and behind the screen. I've been involved in a lot of Black filmmaking over the years. We also changed the training within the union, because what also happened was the ACTT, which is now BEC2, you couldn't get a job unless you had a union card, and you couldn't get a union card unless you had a job. And so Black Media Workers Association, we changed that. We've seen some change. We're getting more, we're visible on screen as well as behind. So I was involved as part of that movement. Also in a lot of political campaigning here in Liverpool, because we got the first, through the Liverpool Black Organisation, we got our first elected councillor. And and some of the businesses in Liverpool have changed somewhat, again, changing the narrative. So that's partly my background. I could go on, but I won't. I'll move over.
So I'm going to ask Blue to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so as you said there, thank you. Many people just call me Blue. I'm Daniel Sibiyange. Also, my professional name is Blue Saint. I'm a music artist, spoken word artist, actor, just everyday creative artist, I suppose. And I've worked with as a young child from like ages 11 to 12 to maybe like 15. I was with Liverpool Young Writers, and then I'm winner of the Mersey Rail Sound Station, and I'm known quite a lot for doing quite a lot of community activism. I worked with a lot of projects in my younger years up till now, such as Tiber, based in Toxteth, as well as a few others. But it'll be I don't have the best memory, so I'd have to be like going back in my head to kind of figure it out. But yeah, that's just me in a nutshell. And everyone just calls me Blue. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Chantal.
Hi, my name's Chantal Luntz, and I'm a writer, entrepreneur, educator and activist. I'm probably best known as the founder of Merseyside BLM Alliance. I'm also the chair of Merseyside Alliance for Racial Equality. I have a juice and smoothie bar called the Little Green Juice Box, and I work as an educator for the Black curriculum.
Amazing, thank you. And last but not least, Francesca.
Hi everyone, I'm Francesca Sabandi and I'm a lecturer in digital media studies at Cardiff University. I'm from Scotland, now based in Wales, Scottish and Welsh, and a lot of my work has focused on the media and digital experiences of Black women in Britain. I've also been working on a project for a number of years with a good friend, writer and independent researcher and organiser on Black history and Black lives in Scotland. So we've got a book on that that's hopefully coming out next year with Zed Books in Bloomsbury.
Amazing. Thank you all so much. So I have to start this conversation by saying that I'm new to the city. I only moved here 18 months ago. So I want to start by understanding, and this is really directed at the those who are Scousers amongst you, about understanding why Liverpool is so politicized. Because as someone who moved here, you get a sense very much that people are very actively engaged in change, actively engaged in politics. And I think I'd read, Chantal, having been so actively involved in sort of setting up the Merseyside Lives Matter Alliance, that's the most recent kind of manifestation that I've seen, and it was so sort of visible last summer. But I'd be really interested to understand what it is about growing up in the city or living in the city that makes people be much, much more perhaps civically minded or focused on change and the kind of politics of change than in other places, because what comes across obviously externally in the media representation of it, and we'll talk about that more, is the rioting or the kind of the very sort of violent nature of some of that sort of political change. But that's got to start from somewhere, and that means, yeah, where does it start for you?
I think as a city, we've historically been othered, haven't we? You know, since the Thatcher years, we kind of tried the whole managed decline thing of Liverpool. They really wanted Liverpool to go under. And then if we go like a little bit further on and look at what happens with Hillsborough, the media campaign, that there was just a hate campaign against the city. And I think when you're othered like that, you know, whether it be through the media, whether it be the Tories, whether it be the politics, and even the rest of the UK have this really strong view of Scousers as, you know, the bottom of the barrel, thieves, no goods, really common, have this really strong view of Scousers. You're forced to create this positive identity. And it's a bit like, you know, the black identity, where because you've got this a lot of negative stereotypes thrown around about, yeah, you're then forced to create a real positive stereotype and come together as a community. I feel like that's what happens in Liverpool, because since the 80s, since the 70s, they've really kind of gone at us as a city. They've always tried to break our spirit. We've actually rejected that, and we've created an even stronger community, which is all around community support, activism, holding each other up, holding the government to account, and calling out the media. You know, we're the only city that's ever kicked out the sun. We're one of the only cities that's got a strong sense of socialism within like our very makeup. We're not really English. That's kind of what you get in Liverpool with Scouts, and it's something that you don't get that feeling anywhere else. It's like I travel a lot, especially with activism up and down the country, and I've never seen that sense of kind of group identity outside of the Black community anywhere else other than Liverpool. It's like we are Scousers, and when I say I'm a Scouser, that's something that I'm proud of, which means that if you are coming for my city, then you're coming for my community, and we're going to fight you. And that's why when something happens to one of us, something happens to all of us. So when we do say, you know, Black Lives Matter, when we do say women's rights, when we do say something is happening and we need to all get out on the street, you'll see a lot more people in Liverpool than you will in other cities. So I think it's that process of being othered by people in positions of power and constantly having an incorrect narrative peddled about us in terms of who we are as people. We fought so hard against that. So it's kind of just ingrained in our identity that we will resist and we will recognize that oppression in other people. So when we see that other people are going through something that we've been through, we're like, no, we reject that as well. We're one of the only cities outside of London to hold a monthly vigil for Grenfell. And that's because we know what, you know what I mean? We know what it's like to suffer loss. We know what it's like to have the government lie and lie and lie about the people who have died. And so that's why Grenfell know that in Liverpool they've got an ally and they'll always have an ally.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I'd have to piggyback on what Chantal said there. Like when we were doing the documentary that called Toxic Rising that came out recently, something Ganan Adamu said as well was and I've heard many other people saying Liverpool, including myself, is like Liverpool's its own country sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like it feels like it's its own like its own place. You know what I mean? Like I watched a theatre show the kids SWAT did as well, that was based around imagine if Liverpool was its own country and things like that. So it definitely does fall on the on the way in which we're viewed from the outside. Like you tend to band together more when you're other than it. So it's like it's that sort of that it stems from that sort of dynamic. I remember also so you'll notice quite a lot of artists say it, quite a lot of people local say it. So another artist that I'll also mention, MC Nelson, he dropped a song last year, I think, and he called it the People's Republic of Liverpool. So there's always got that concept of like we're in our own sort of world, like we're all together. So yeah, 100% agree with what Chantal said there.
Yeah, I mean, I can go a bit further. I mean, one of the things about the Black community in Liverpool, I mean, we're the oldest Black community in the UK. We go right back to the 1700s, and a lot of the families here in Liverpool can trace our ancestry back. But we've always been underrepresented all the time in education, jobs, and that's why as groups we formed the Liverpool Black Organisation. We can go right back to when Charles Wotton was the 1919 riots, and we can see what happened there. And that's why the Black community has had to keep itself together, because we've always been underrepresented. You know, we're on to third and fourth generation now, Liverpool born Blacks. And yet, you know, it's only now that we're seeing, you know, some disparity or togetherness, you know, of education. You know, if you still look at the universities, you know, disproportionately, you know, we're still underrepresented in all those areas. But as a community, we've recognized that, and we've come together, not just like in over riots, we've come together over other issues as well. A lot of you might not know the history of the Fletcher Report and the way we were represented in the Fletcher Report, that we were the products of prostitutes and sailors. That's how, you know, a reporter described Liverpool Black youth at the time, that we were a non-entity. Black children were a non-entity. And that came out of an academic piece of research from Liverpool University called the Fletcher Report. And so that's, you know, that view of how they viewed us, that, you know, I'm going back like to that report came out in the late 50s, early 60s. And so that's why we've had this togetherness where we've had to come together and defend ourselves as a community and take action. And that action has come about, you know, not from years and years ago, but also, you know, we can see it today, how we've been, you know, underrepresented in this city in terms of housing, you know, whatever it is there. It's like we were, you know, they were saying we were a non-entity, and that's how we were feeling. We would, you know, but they, you know, this thing about, you know, Toxteth, the name Toxteth only ever came about after 1981. It was never known as Toxteth. It was L8. And that, you know, and we still call it L8, not Toxteth. It was the media that described it. So, yes, I agree with you, Chantal, and my other colleagues here, Blue. The way because we've been underrepresented in the past, that togetherness, and we do come together and defend our area, defend our individuals, defend our community, and take, you know, and knock people away who want to see us as other.
I mean, thank you. That actually, that really helps to kind of contextualize it. And one of the things that strikes me that's really interesting about how it's a community that's feeling in its entirety that it's not just sort of L8, but it's kind of like a citywide thing as well. I suppose one of the questions that comes next to me is about leadership, because this isn't, you know, how does a community organize itself to be able to change its story or push back or come back to a different kind of identity. And this kind of leads us into the kind of questions about representation and community organization. But how does leadership what role does leadership play within the Liverpool context? You know, when we see the riots, it always feels kind of chaotic and disorderly, and that is the media representation of them. But there's also something else happening behind that, where communities are making things happen for themselves.
Well, I'm just looking at talking about the 1981 riots. Like, as you said, people said it was looting. The riot started because of Leroy Cooper being arrested on the 8th of July, on a Friday afternoon on the 8th of July. And it was the police who, because he'd got off with his court case, said, we're going to have you. And, that's how all that started. And it was the young people that defended him when they tried to rearrest him. That's how it all started. But, I was part of the Liverpool 8 Defence Committee, and we quickly formed that committee to enable the community to get help wherever needed, because they arrested on that night of the 8th of July, and it was the 4th, the 5th and the 6th. They arrested hundreds and hundreds of young people for no apparent reason at all. They were just saying it, oh, you're a looter, you're a looter. And, so we've very quickly formed the Liverpool 8 Defence Committee, and we formed that in the old Charles Wotton Centre in Upper Parliament Street, because we realised that legal representative was required right away to get kids out of Walton Prison. And so you're talking about leadership. I mean, people very quickly come together to form leadership, and the Defence Committee was the leadership at that time. And out of that, of course, stemmed the Liverpool 8 Law Centre. That's what came out of the Defence Committee and out of the riots for the community.
Would you say that that's kind of changed over time? So Chantal, when thinking about the Black Lives Matter Alliance, how does something like that come about? Because it's so outward facing, it's so connected to other sort of, I guess, I don't know how you describe it, other alliances affiliated in sort of solidarity with Black Lives Matter, both within the UK and internationally. How does this idea of kind of communities coming together to take charge of a situation, how has that changed from the sort of situation that Bee's just described?
I'd say it's a lot similar to how Bee's described. I'd say the process is always just a reaction. The process will always be reactive. We don't know we're about to process. We don't know we're about to be on the street. We didn't know it was going to happen, but it happened, and we kind of all had to just get out there and kind of hit the ground running. And part of that is finding out what the current setup is. So, for example, in LA's at the moment, the setup's a little bit different in Merseyside than it was. The Black community, LA's being gentrified massively. There's only 25% of the Black community left there, which means 75% of us are now really scattered, which also means we're really vulnerable because we're isolated in areas where we're not the majority, we're actually the minority. So a big part of BLM was, okay, what does our Black community in Merseyside look like now? Where is our Black community? What are the experiences of racism? And also, what are those intersections? Because I think if you think of like BLM, like feminism, with each wave, something new happens. And I'd say this wave of BLM was very much about looking at the intersections of Black identities and also focusing on the experiences of Black people in marginalised areas. The Black people who kind of haven't got the community to protect them, who are, in Heighton, where poor Anthony Walker was, in Hale Woods, where I am, where there's only usually about 1% of us, and we experience a real, real racism from the 80s around here. So I think that was a key to understand, okay, how are you experiencing racism depending on where you live geographically in the region, and also who you are as a person, me as a Black woman, someone who might be Black and LGBT, what does racism look like for you? So once we got that, then there was the kinds of organising part that Bee's spoken about. So one thing that we set up after we'd, kind of taken stock of everything that was going on was we set up a CIC so that we could go into the community and do the work, because we had a good idea of what work needed to be done because we've been on the ground. But for us, I'd say the biggest difference between the 80s and now is technology. Because of technology, it wasn't like, and because of COVID, I have a son who's Shields, and so most of my stuff was done on Zoom. We were able to reach more people, also a national network, also an international network, and organise a lot quicker than I think we did in the 80s. We were able to coordinate, actions in different areas. We were able to join up groups. So the groups that I'm connected with, although the kinds of scatters around the UK, there's some all the way up in Leeds, there's some, down in Sandbach and rural areas. We're kind of connected around the needs of the people in our communities. So a lot of the groups that I connect with are groups where a lot of the Black community are quite marginalised where they live. So we have although we're geographically sporadic, we're everywhere, we've got similar issues. So that's kind of what brings us together. And then we'll connect to a bigger network sort of as a group. So I think technology definitely helped us to organise. It definitely helped us to understand what the situation was nationally and internationally. And it helped us to figure out what our next steps were and also to support each other. So I think what the police were really worried about is, which is why they've redefined a few laws in the past year. They've called us aggravated activists, which basically sort of puts us in the same category as a terrorist. And to be an aggravated activist, all you have to do is travel from one city to another and basically speak at a protest. And I think that's what freaked the police out, because it was like, why are all these people turning up from other cities in like Sandbach or Stoke? Why are they in London? Why aren't they just in their area? And it was because we were connected. We knew what was going on. We knew that someone had been stabbed and they needed support. We knew that there was, you know, a young lad who was locked up for no good reason in London. And we got there and we stood there with other protesters, and it really shook them, because it's like, why is this scouser in London? You know, she should be down in Liverpool. What's going on? So I think technology really did help us to strategize, organize, and be effective for our communities.
I want to bring Francesca in, because I feel like this is also, Francesca, such a huge part of the research that you've been doing in terms of particularly thinking about women and sort of the digital activism that sort of, and organizing that has happened historically to present day in terms of how technology has really changed that. And it would be really great to get your thoughts on those shifts that have happened over time as well.
Sure, yeah, I think I've been looking at quite a lot of this in particular since 2015. I mean, personally, I've always been interested in doing work that relates to these things, but from 2015 to this point, the digital and the rise of social media and online content sharing platforms and how that shapes experiences of activism and collective organizing is something I've been focusing on a lot. And I feel as though, you know, one of the positives that we're reflecting on here is how what would once perhaps be confined to a particular local area, you know, an issue, something that happens, experiences of anti-Blackness, there is a real opportunity to connect with people across different regions and within Britain and beyond. So transnational forms of solidarity have been incredibly encouraging, looking at the different ways that what's going on in one part of the UK is an experience that is relatable for Black people around the world. And I think the flip side of all this, or maybe before moving on to thinking about some more of the negatives, something else that I think is exciting when we look at the different ways that Black people have been using digital technology to come together and to collaborate and to hold individuals and institutions accountable is the ways that leadership is challenged. So I think, you know, ideas to do with leadership sometimes can be incredibly hierarchical and can uphold the same sorts of power dynamics that people are wanting to push against. And I definitely wouldn't say that digital technology has completely democratized things, because we know that because of anti-Blackness, because of the forms of online harassment, abuse and surveillance that Black people face, digital tech is far from being any sort of simple solution. But I would say that we have seen people who ordinarily would not necessarily be able to reach the number of people that they can now, being able to change things, being able to amplify what's going on, being able to do work in a way that previously they might not have been able to. So I'm just conscious that sometimes when we think about leadership, those who are most marginalized within different Black communities aren't necessarily the people associated with leadership, but they are still the people who are doing very important work. And I think that digital media and social media has been really helpful in that way. I'll maybe just sort of leave thoughts here by saying that I'm always conscious of surveillance. I'm always conscious, as Chantel was speaking about, of, you know, the intersections of these different issues. So whether that's anti-Blackness, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, the fact that there are a lot of risks involved in being visible online. And I'm also aware that there are people doing incredible work with the use of digital technology in pretty private underground ways. So I think sometimes it's good to reflect on the fact that the work that's happening is not always visible, and that's because it's important to do work in ways that is going to be most impactful, but it's also not going to be at the cost of the health and well-being of the very Black people doing that work.
Yeah, and on that note, and tops on the thought of like work that isn't all necessarily visible, but just as effective, the ways in which I came into like developing leadership sort of skills and activism was in my younger years going to youth centers. So it was like the youth leaders and things like that got me involved in quite a lot of different projects, and a lot of my peers too, because they already had community activists that were also youth leaders there, that were there, that encourage us and empower us, and then give us the necessary skills needed in order to also teach the next generation. In fact, we did a project called Next Generation Speaks that was on that that was its whole theme, was to give was to empower artists to not just use their creative skills to perform, but to also be able to be good facilitators or workshop leaders or community leaders and things like that, to give the next generation the necessary tools in order to continue passing on the baton. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
Yeah, no, I want to pick up on Francesca's point about the negative aspects, but what you just said brought another question to mind, which was about this relationship between art and activism. And I guess wanting to understand to what extent your creative practice, both of you particularly, is fueled by a sort of activist impulse, or to what extent you see the work that you make as being a sort of legacy of the activism that you do.
Could you read
Yeah,
that?
no, so I guess, do you think of your work as being activist in why you do it, or do you see the activism that as kind of the art that you make, or the work that you make, as being the kind of, I guess, the legacy of all of the other activism stuff that you do? Like, how do you balance those two things?
For me, I think it's a bit of both, because like I still have the mind state of from even hearing what B is saying, like things that I wasn't there for, like in the 1980s, but knowing the history, like understanding that we're just standing on the shoulders of giants. You know, there's got all this work that's been done beforehand that has influenced me, and then knowing that the work that I do it with the mind state of wanting to be an activist, but also still feeling free enough to just create for fun. But yeah, so it's a bit of both. It's like the idea of me fully understanding that a lot of the things that I'm able to do now, other people already paved the way for that. And just kind of continuing that sort of legacy.
Yeah, I suppose the body of work that I've produced over the years, I would say, it's a legacy, but it's also part of the activism and what I believed in and how I wanted to shape. That's why I became an independent producer, because I wanted to shape the work I was doing my way rather than what the establishment wanted. And so all the films that I've made, I mean, they are a legacy, but they're all part of activism. I mean, for example, when the Channel 4 commissioned us to do the film on the 1981 riots, their view of how they wanted it made was totally different than what we wanted. They just wanted, a group of young Black youth over a billiard table, that picture that they always had. And what we did actually on that, first of all, we needed the story to be told from the people who are affected. And so what we did with the youth, we formed a media company. We formed them into a media company. And so we got them to get the commission. I was a producer, but we got them to be commissioned by Channel 4. So they became the company, and they then employed other people to do the technical, but they told the story. And so we turned the whole film upside down, because we said, who benefits from riots? And so we had to look at Liverpool and the history of riots. We went right back to 1919, and we were fortunate when we made the film, we still had a gentleman who's passed now who knew and was involved in the 1919 riots. And we looked at the 1948 riots. We looked at the 72 riots. And our big question, or the story, what was being told, who benefits, and it was not the Black community. And so that's how they made, and then interspersed with that, we brought in the art side of it, because Levi Tafari is involved in a other artist. And so we told a story in quite a different and radical way than what the establishment wanted. So again, so, the legacy we're talking about, activism. And so through that film, you see all of that coming through.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's so important to kind of consider who's telling the story in all of this, because I think one of the things that has really changed for better and for worse over the last decade is that because of mobile phone technology, in particular smartphones, everyone has the capacity to tell the story. Everyone has the capacity to be able to give visibility to their story. And that isn't we're no longer reliant on mainstream media to shape or frame that narrative. And all of the kind of sort of pitfalls that throws up. But what that also does is, when you have everyone telling their story, how do you actually create that sense of solidarity? How do you create that sense where people aren't fighting against each other? People are kind of taking their own stories and bringing together to come together for a shared cause, which might not be exactly their problem or their cause or their issues. How do you stop that sort of fragmentation, when actually all we're encouraged to do by the media company, by the social media companies and platforms, is to generate content for other people to consume? So this tension between self-representation and then sort of being trapped in your own bubble is something that I think is maybe one of the pitfalls that Francesca was alluding to also.
Yeah, I guess what I was thinking about as well is just this tension between the potential for social media and digital technology to be used as part of really important Black liberationist work, and then the reality that a lot of these platforms are commercial in nature. They weren't made by or for Black people, or certainly were not made to support this sort of work. So I think it's about reflecting on what does that mean in terms of some of the trade-offs that can involve. And also, as everybody's been speaking about right now, I think there's sometimes a risk that there's such an emphasis on sort of recent months or recent years that we forget that what we're seeing right now is an extension of the work of those who came before. This work isn't happening because of the technology, but people are using the technology in really impactful ways. So I think I'm just mindful of, we've seen so many brands and organizations, especially since sort of last spring, suddenly wanting to be seen and to be interested in or claiming to be invested in the lives of Black people, and sometimes doing that in ways that involves them tapping into or sort of trying to piggyback off of what Black people are posting and sharing online. And for me, that doesn't mean that there aren't still really great opportunities for technology and social media to be used as part of the work we're discussing. I think it's just about how people stay ahead of or do things in a way that involves pushing back or trying to subvert those organizations that are just ultimately interested in profit and are often based on anti-Black foundations as well. So thinking about racial capitalism and what it means when it comes to recognizing both the benefits and limitations of digital technology for the sort of causes and the sort of work that we're discussing right now.
Yeah, I just wanted to just piggyback on what Francesca was saying there as well. Like looking at are also the negative sides, because of course, like such as people sometimes just doing things because it's a trend, because it's a trending topic and things like that. For instance, beautiful but great thing that occurred was was the black squares that happened, but then there would also be people who would just do it to as virtue signaling and things like that. And then there's also got in terms of information, the great thing about technology is like everybody's got a mobile phone, so it's very easy to gain information, but on the flip side, it's also very easy to gain misinformation. So it's like when it comes to technology, because it has so much power, there's an added weight to making sure that that balance is there, and proper research is also conducted as well. I wanted to just add there to what Francesca was saying.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think it does have to be coupled with action. That's the key thing. We can't just have social media without action. It's like without social media, we wouldn't have had BLM 2020. There wouldn't have been the biggest Black civil rights movement that the world has ever seen. That happened because of social media, but it didn't just happen because of social media. It also happened because social media drove people to get out, get on the street, get into the communities, get into the offices, get into the boardrooms, and carry that conversation on. So it can't just happen singularly. It can't happen on its own. It has to happen kind of with other actions that were taken out into the community. And it has to also be kind of directed, which I think is why the BLM groups and the BLM leaders were really essential, because they were kind of leading the conversation and driving it in a certain way and saying, okay, today we need to focus on this month we need to focus on this, we need to be posting about this, which is why hashtags are great. But for me, the biggest benefit of social media was that it allowed us to have a counter narrative, because I feel like without social media, we would have just been thugs like we were back in 2011. We would have just been, criminals like we were in 1981. We would have just been uneducated Black people crying over nothing like they've called us time and time again. The only difference this time round was we were able to say, no, this is who we are. And we were able to show the world who we were as people. And that is why we had the most kind of white allyship, the most allyship from LGBT communities, from communities who have never stood with us before, because this is the first time we had a platform that we could show them who we were. And that is what the government and everyone else who's tried to bring BLM down has struggled with time and time again. They cannot counteract our narrative, because we've been able to hold ourselves up via social media and say, no, this is what we're doing. We're not fighting, we're protesting peacefully, and we've got a message, we've got something that we want you to do. So I think it's been really, really powerful. But like sort of Lou says, and like Francesca said, there's also that kind of whole, the black square, the commercialization, like people saying that about Black people, buy this BLM t-shirt, but you won't employ someone to sell it. So it's a sort of double-edged sword. But I think it's been, as a Black community, it's been our most powerful tool, especially during the pandemic.
Just quickly, just so Chantal, that was great. It just made me think about evidence as well, like by having social media and videos and capturing. I mean, the reason why the 2020 protests occurred was that we all saw what happened. Do you know what I mean? Like it couldn't really be put under the rug as it was back in the day. Like he say, she say, like, because the nobody was able to capture the events, whatever tragedies would occur. So that's another great powerful thing about social media. Like we've actually got the receipts. Do you know what I mean? Someone's like, oh no, that didn't happen. He's like, no, it did. I've got the video right here. Do you know what I mean? Or I've got this, or this screenshot of what this person said, or what the CEO said, or wherever else it is. So that's also a very powerful thing about social media.
Yeah, it's able to hold people to account.
Exactly.
Yes, yeah, very much so. Yeah, I totally agree with you, Chantel. I mean, what I've seen, every time you put on your computer, there's another organization that, they're contributing, saying this is our statement on BLM. And I'm still waiting to see, well, are they going to employ anybody who are on the boards? They're all putting out these statements. But when are we going to see the change? When is it going to be implemented? Words, anybody can say as many words as they want to, but what we're looking for now, through Black Lives Matter as well, is the change. We need to see the change.
I think the other thing that points to, holding people to account, but also it's that opportunity to change how, what Chantal was saying about, well, this is who we are. Well, the community isn't just victims or predisposed to criminality, which is how the news media tends to represent Black communities, either as victims of something or as perpetrators of something. What's the other narrative? Where's the kind of positive force? Where's the positive kind of messaging and imaging around what the communities are actually doing and how people are living their lives? And I think mainstream media definitely ignores that quite a lot. But I don't know how you feel whether social media is an appropriate platform for that.
I think it's been a really powerful platform for that, especially meme culture. Don't ever underestimate the power of meme culture. Back in the 40s and the 30s, does anyone heard of the penny postcards? It was basically a thing in America that they did after the end of slavery, and it was another way to keep Black people down because they had to have a way of, having a kind of hierarchy without having a legal hierarchy. So they created all these penny postcards with images of Black women and Black men, just really derogatory images, portraying Black women as violent and dominating, and Black men quite inappropriately making fun of the genitalia and their intellect and things like that. That's actually pulled through to meme culture. So there's a lot of memes out there, racist memes and memes that just perpetuate these images of Black people as thick or criminals. And a beautiful thing that's come out of BLM and just a Black Twitter in general, there's just incredible. And this is where art kind of comes into activism. There are artists out there who just put out fantastic imagery. I remember before Disney started making Black princesses mainstream, there were artists who did every Disney princess as a Black princess, and put images out there of Black families, Black nuclear families, Black people in positions of power. And so you can go onto the internet and you can be empowered as a Black person, and you can see things that, they're starting to put it in adverts and on mainstream media now, but before it was there, it was on social media. So I feel like social media does drive what then can go into the media. And a lot of the conversations, something which is, it's a double-edged sword again, but something that's quite powerful is a lot of the discussions we'll have in our group on BLM, in our little Facebook group about, why don't we see more of this in the media? Why don't we see more of this on the news? We have a lot of reporters in the group, and they'll go and do a story about it, and they'll start reporting on the things that we're saying. Well, they never report on this, they never do this. They'll actually take that on board, and they'll go out and they'll go, okay, today we're going to talk about mixed race families where the mother is Black and the children are lighter skin, because we don't always see that in the media. So I do think social media, it can be just this, it's awful, obviously, we've all been on the Daily Mail comment section, but it can be this beautiful space where you can drive forward a conversation that then spills over into mainstream media. And, I think I'm 30 odd now, but I didn't see myself in the media, and I didn't see myself in imagery and in cartoons and anywhere when I was younger. But I think about young people now, and my son, he can see himself whenever he opens his phone. He can see people who look like him, and he can see them doing amazing things just because there's someone out there on a computer creating it. So I do think that's something to be celebrated, and I do think it's an amazing accomplishment.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I couldn't agree more. I completely agree with all of exactly that. And I was just gonna add something that I've been really interested in is the role of whether it's meme culture, Black Twitter, and Black digital experiences in archives. So as part of that project I mentioned earlier on with Leila Roxanne Hill on Black History and Black Lives in Scotland, we've been looking at different archives and also doing interviews and speaking to Black people right now and looking at media pieces from decades ago and media in this moment. And we were just reflecting on the importance of the different ways that archives function right now. And so much of what's happening in digital spaces, it can be sort of short-term in nature, it can be lost. And that can sometimes be good when it comes to posting something that you need to be disappeared you need for that to disappear shortly after. Although I would caveat that by saying the risks of surveillance, what we think is deleted or what we think disappears doesn't always disappear. But yeah, I guess what I was thinking throughout all of this is just the fact that what we're discussing, these are Black artifacts, this is Black history, this is Black memory making happening in real time. And I think it's very easy for mainstream media to dismiss what's going on online, to trivialize it, and to use terms such as slacktivism that don't really capture the importance of all of this and the fact that it can be a source of joy, it can be a source of pleasure, but it can also be the way that people are documenting what's happening now for future generations too.
Activism was something that I was also interested in as a general thing of how now that you can share your sort of solidarity with something with a single click of signing a petition, how do you actually genuinely engage people to take action? What Chantal, you talked a little bit about the social media needed to be backed up by action. But how do you inspire action when it isn't just a click of a button?
There's got loads of different ways. Like so, like, and going back to what I said with me, it was just by going to different projects, by being out there. You know, like with the great thing with social media, such as what with Chantal's got with the BLM Alliance, and there's got so many other groups as well online. You can find they're all there. You can find these groups. You know, you can make like and you can join and like find out what sort of actions, because they've all got actions, you know, within the groups, like what sort of actions to take. With me before knowing about groups and things like that, when I was younger, like I said, it was like in the youth centers and being told about, oh, there's got this project happening in the Cumbermani, there's got this project happening over here in Toxic TV or wherever else. So it's just about just going out there, or like we've got Google as well, you know, we live in the age of Google, so like you can literally just if you want to learn more, one of the biggest things as well is in order to avoid misinformation and things, like educating yourself, you know what I mean, and just asking people around you asking people around you, I'm losing words right now. But yeah, asking people around you, if you have a question, just to ask it so that you can actually learn and grow from there.
Yeah, I entirely agree with you. I mean, you know, how to take action, yet we can click the button. But again, I think it's giving control to people. One of the things we did a few years ago, I know I'm always going back, but we formed the Women's Independent Cinema House, and that was to get more women involved in them telling their story and how they were represented. And they made a film because they did a survey first right here in Liverpool, and it was just a vox pops, and they were just going around asking people, what work do Black women do? And every one of them said they were cleaners. They had no other image of what Black work women do. But out of that, the young women that were involved in the project, they actually formed this big exhibition called Hidden Strengths. It went up, we moved it on, and it went to become a BBC Two film. But it was by them taking the action themselves and how they were represented. They changed themselves as well, being educated. And again, you can change that action, you know, and you've got to have the tools as well to do it, you know.
Yeah. I feel like now is probably a good time to open it out to other people's questions, if anyone has them.
Like obviously with the BLM and everyone saw that. I mean, for me, as in that particular place, I felt like getting you know, and Zoom was that power there, and actually setting up. Oh yeah,
sorry, they can't hear you.
Oh, could they not hear me? So what I was saying was actually providing spaces. So like what had happened, say for example, for George Floyd, I mean, we're all affected by that. And with that, when we're talking about action and providing spaces, so at the time, yes, we've got sort of like a tool of digital, like Zoom or whatever it is that's there, but it's getting a group of friends and just having a conversation, you know, starting with those little conversation, then sort of like creates bigger ideas and those kind of things, creating spaces for people to be able to tell the stories, talk about their experiences, have a place where they feel safe enough to do that. It's a place where we start creating ideas in order to create something bigger or smaller, whatever it is, those little pockets that you create. So that's what I want to just add on top of that.
Did you guys hear that on Zoom? Okay, good. Just checking. Yeah, I think the idea of safe spaces is actually hugely important. And the internet can do that, but it's also filled with nasty trolls. And I wonder what strategies and tactics we can employ to sort of deal with that.
Do you mean on the internet?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that kind of collective conversation can happen online, particularly transnationally. but it's also subject to so much vitriol.
Well, there's got different ways of I just realized I was holding this on my other hand for so long that my hand got tight. But there's got ways of monitoring it. So like I know with groups, for instance, you've got certain rules you can put in place before somebody joins in. And then there's got the admin and things like that who can monitor to see if everybody's like there's no vitriol, I suppose, going on within the group itself. So that's just one way that just popped in my head now. I'll pass it to B because I think he's going to say something.
Okay. Either one of you.
Cool. Yeah, I was just going to say we just have really, really strict rules for getting in the group. So our group will probably be about 5 times the size it is if we just let anyone in. But for us, it's more about having that safe space, having a space for people who actually want to do stuff and who want to be involved, and having this big, massive group. We just want a group where like-minded people can get together and really push forward for change. As Blue's touched on, there's loads of options. So our group isn't public. You can't see it unless you're in the group. We monitor comments, we monitor who's posting, and things flag up. We've got like certain words. If someone types a certain word, it flags up. But the safest thing that we did was just made it really hard for people to get in the first place. So it's not just yes, no questions. You have to tell us why you want to be in this space. You have to agree that you're going to be courteous and that you're going to support people from other communities, not just the Black community. And to be honest, we've only ever had one person who we've had to kick out the group. And that was more because they had a heated debate and were just a little bit rude to someone else. And we were like, oh, come on, you didn't need to call them that. But it wasn't even an issue of someone coming in to be a troll. It was just they got a bit upset with each other and we were like, right, you'll have to go. But it's a credit. Like I admin quite a lot of other groups and I know other people who manage groups, and our group is a credit to us because we never really have to do anything. And it's quite beautiful because, you can't guarantee a safe space, and I don't tell anyone it's a safe space because while it is, a safe-ish space, it's the internet. And as, Francesca's touched on, the internet is not a safe space. You can't make it safe. But it is a listening space and it is a space where people can be heard. And like one of the nicest things that I think about the group is you go on. And like there was someone the other week who was having a really tough time at work with racism, and she put a load of stuff up. And in the early days, it would have been me and the admin team like, oh, okay, we'll help you, blah, blah, blah. You go to this person, go to this lawyer, do this, do that. And I think, I've been sick with COVID. And I was like, and I looked and I was like, I hadn't got back to her. There was like 100 comments from everyone in the group. It was like, okay, I know this person who's an employment lawyer. I know this person down here. Like, go here. We're going to help you. Come to mine. I'll get you this. And they completely helped her. And I didn't even have to say it. And I was just like, oh my God. And I was like looking at the people in the admin group. I was like, we've created a community where they're helping each other. Do you know what I mean? We don't have to do anything anymore. We've created this gorgeous little community where if someone comes on and says, I'm having a tough time at work or I'm having a tough time in my community, everyone knows that we're going to help you within that group. So I just thought that was really, really gorgeous. But that wouldn't have happened if in the early days we just sort of left it open and let anyone join, and anything goes and anyone can post anything. You do have to moderate, and you do have to be a bit strict about what you'll allow and what you won't allow within the group setting. It's just the way it is.
Do you find that there's a danger though with closed groups that the conversation gets limited to itself? How do you make sure that the conversation stays relevant, is pushing change that is meaningful to the way that society itself is changing, that it isn't just a kind of closed in conversation amongst a group of like-minded people who aren't maybe, there is that danger that then we talked about this a little bit yesterday, that you then come out of your sort of little bubble of safe space, and then you're confronted with the ugliness of reality.
Definitely. I think that's always a risk, especially just with the internet the way it is. Facebook, Twitter, all of the algorithms just are set so you only see what you like to see. Unfortunately for me, they actually do think that I like to see racism because I always read stories about racism, so they just show me more racism. But within our group, we kind of have monthly themes. So we have things that we talk about that are current and relevant. So, when it was the Euro 2020, we spoke about the football, we spoke about what was out there. We'll sometimes have experts, like on Tuesday, we've got a clinical psychiatrist. We're doing like an event with a clinical psychiatrist to talk about Black mental health and Black trauma. So as much as we can, we're reaching outwards and bringing things in and not kind of, shielding people from the world, because we don't want to do that. But I do think that if you've got a group, you can't have a space with, say, the far right and Black activists. You just can't, because one group hates the other and you'll never find that middle ground. And you sometimes, you guys will probably know this as activists, sometimes people do want to put you in a space with someone who literally wants you to die. And I just will not be in the space with them, because they're not about having a constructive conversation. They're literally about hating you, and they don't want to find a middle ground, and they don't want to find a solution. So it's not everyone. There are people who are, racist because they just don't know any better. And those people, all day long will try and educate them. But then there's people who genuinely enjoy how they think, enjoy how they feel, and they don't want to change. And I just think it's a waste of energy to try and get anywhere with those type of people. So I do think you should have a good mix of opinions, but I do draw the line at, people who don't really want to be in the group because all they want to go in to do is cause trouble and to harm someone who is within that group setting. So it's a juggle, and it's kind of, I don't think you'll ever get it right, but I think as much as we can, we have.
Yeah, I was just going to, sorry. I'm just going to completely agree with you again and say I think there's a risk that sometimes people imply that the work that Black people are doing should always be public and visible, when the reality is actually, spaces that are more private, spaces that are more intimate, and spaces, again, as has been said, that don't necessarily include loads and loads of people. They might be viewed as quite small spaces, and that doesn't mean that they're not important, and it doesn't mean that they can't be very impactful. So I think that whilst there are times when the intention might be about amplifying a message, getting it out there, I also think it's equally important that we have those spaces that serve a very different purpose, and those spaces where Black people can discuss things also amongst themselves without sort of anticipating an institutional white gaze. And I was also just thinking in response to some of the earlier things we were speaking about, I'm conscious that there can be this expectation that Black people have to be presenting a certain image to be viewed as worthy of respect and support, when actually I think something that's been really great about digital culture is pushing back against respectability politics. It's not even about we need to challenge anything. It's people sharing their own experiences on their own terms, and sometimes that means making things visible, and other times it doesn't.
Yeah, just to add to everything that was said there from both Francesca, Chantal, and Lena in the audience about spaces, it's like and touching on what you were saying there about like trying to avoid being in an echo chamber, or like feeling like you're just preaching to the choir, is you can literally create spaces that are the middle ground if you want that type of conversation. So like both can exist. So you can have the conversations in which you are just speaking to the choir, I suppose, like you're just speaking to people who are like-minded with you, where you feel comfortable, and then you can create separate spaces in which two people with their two different camps of different ideas coming together to sort of reach a conclusion that both can exist and do exist. And I feel like that's actually the best way to do it, because you got somewhere where you can just you feel more relaxed, and where you can learn and learn how to like articulate yourself, because you might have great ideas and great thoughts but you just don't know how to articulate it, and you need to, like, I don't know, go to your family, like your group, to just kind of hash it out, and then it's easier for you to then have these conversations with the people who you want to have the conversations with. Yeah,
absolutely. Are there more questions?
I suppose this is for everyone, but particularly interested in Francesca's point of view in terms of sort of looking at cancel culture and the risk of that whole thing in terms of like layered issues like this becoming simplified and like decontextualized. So within this context, like, where does that sit, and is it a dangerous path that we're going down?
what I'd say in response to that, Meredith Clark's done really great work on so-called cancel culture, and also thinking specifically about call-out culture and the roots of call-out culture in the experiences of Black people often speaking truth to power. So I think what I'm really conscious of is when individuals or institutions will claim someone or something has been cancelled, but the reality is that person is just being very rightly critiqued by those who are most marginalized. So definitely I feel as though we've all been saying, we don't think there's this utopian view of social media and digital technology. We're aware of all the problems that surround it. But for me, I think there are times when people who are highlighting issues to do with injustice are dismissed and are accused of cancelling somebody or something, when the reality is I'm yet to really see an individual or institution who has rightly been called out actually face any significant sort of repercussions as a result of that.
I agree. When you say cancel culture, the two people who spring to my mind are Piers Morgan and Sharon Osbourne. And they shouted very loudly to the 5 million followers, or God knows how many, how they were being cancelled, while actually there weren't really any ramifications to what they were doing other than them saying really loudly, they're cancelling me, they're cancelling me. And I thought, no, actually, you're just being held to account for really inappropriate conduct, which is what should happen. So usually the only people you hear shouting about cancel culture are people who've been called out, rightly so, and have had to account for themselves for doing something that they shouldn't have been doing. They never really lose the job. Someone just says that what you did there, that was wrong and you shouldn't do it again, and then they spit the dummy out and say they're being cancelled, do an interview about being cancelled, do a million tweets about being cancelled, and they get more attention than they've ever had. And I'm like, how were you cancelled?
Yeah, that was Katie Hopkins is another person like that.
I was just thinking about Black people and mental health and how that's not often talked enough about as well. And being activists and being, active artists, how do you avoid burnout? And is it inevitable? Is it going to happen? But what self-care steps can you take to help avoid that?
Who wants to start with that one?
That's a big one.
I don't mind starting with this one. So I'd say there's a huge risk of burnout to any person who's Black, just living in the world that we live in, living in a world where you're a minority. I'd say it's kind of been exacerbated over the last 2 years. And if you're someone who's engaged in activism, then again, that's another compound of kinds of mental pressure that you're under. For me, Dr. Marv, who I mentioned before, we're doing an actual panel discussion on Tuesday. If you check out BLM or any of our socials, it's on there, all about Black trauma, Black mental health and tips for Black mental well-being. And I did a discussion with him about a year ago, and the best tip he ever gave me was develop mastery at something that isn't anything to do with being an activist or, racism or trauma. Develop a hobby that's completely different to that and that takes you away from that and that takes your attention away from that, preferably something that you're doing where your hands and your mind's engaged. So I'm really into cycling and yoga and any exercise, like running, anything where my phone is not in my hand, because for me, my phone is it used to be fun, my phone, but now it's just a massive source of stress because everything is always either people sending me racism or it's just to do with activism, which I love, but you shouldn't have it 24/7, whereas phones are 24/7. So quite often you'll see my phone just be face down and I'll be doing something else. So for me, it's really important to know that this is a fight that will be here. Hopefully not forever in my lifetime, but it's going to be here for a while. And if I want to be here for a while, then I have to be able to take myself away from the fight, whether it's an hour a day, whether it's a weekend, whether it's a month, however long I need to mentally recover, because it's that whole airplane scenario. You can't give to anyone else while you're ignoring yourself. So you have to put your own mask on first before you can save anyone else. So you do have to just be aware that, you're not letting anyone down to take time away. You're not letting yourself down. You're actually replenishing yourself and you're looking after yourself. So don't feel guilty about wellness and, looking after yourself and looking after your own mental well-being. Just do it whenever you need it for as long as you need it. And there'll always be someone else to take care of things.
That's exactly what I was gonna say there at the end. Not feeling don't put everything, don't put the world on your shoulders and think I need to be the one that says this that needs to say all this because there's got other people around doing the same sort of things. So like if you as to what Chantal says, it's like if you're not able to help yourself, how you able to help anybody else? You know what I mean? So it's just like just making sure that yeah, just for me, like one of the things is just remembering that there's got other people there, and also people, if somebody really wants information, especially being Black, you sometimes don't want to have to relive like a trauma, or have to you probably already told like 5 different people a story, and then somebody else comes and they think like it's like they're asking you like a new question, and you're like, already answered this like 10 times. So it's like just also knowing that, you know, like I said before, Google's a thing. It's a real thing. there's got information out there. Like if you really want to look for it. One beautiful thing that I saw like last year when I was in 2020, was somebody up like a list of like a document, like a Google document drive with like information. I'll have to find it, with like information around like the different Black things around
like
BLM resources. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, I was like, what's it called? Yeah,
self-help group.
Yeah, so they had a lot of resources there, and it was so great, because at one point I was just feeling really tired, and somebody else asked me a question on Insta, and I was just like, link. I just sent them the link, like it's right there.
Do you have a Blue Saint FAQ?
I should have now, shouldn't I? Yeah. But yeah, so there's just remembering that there's got those resources out there for people to go to.
Yeah, there's a lot of like, you know, my favorite thing is directing people to the website. Let me Google that for you.
Yeah.
There is a hell of a lot of resources out there, and I'm so pleased about that now, which wasn't there before. But taking up what Chantal said, you know, about Black mental health. I mean, somebody, I think it was in 2018, there was an action going on, and somebody sent me an email and said, oh, B, this is actions going on. And they said, are you going to be there? And I said, no. I said, because I'm doing it. They said, well, I think you ought to be there because you're a Black woman.
Nope.
And it's that type of, that's what happens to you as well. People try and guilt you. And I said, I was able to deal with it. But what I'm saying, you know, they try to guilt you into you being there because you're Black. I mean, and that's what we used to do many, many years ago, because we felt we ought to be there at the expense of our own mental health, you know, out at every demonstration, out at every action, without taking care of ourselves. But then you get other people saying, well, you know, you're a Black woman, you ought to be there.
There's another question, lady in the pink dress.
Thanks. Hi. I just wanted to say, I think the other downside of social media is the intrusive nature of it, and the intrusive nature of Black trauma, and the times I've had to just stay off social media because of like the Euro finals. I could not bear the knowing that the previous experiences and the traumas that I've had in the past being replayed for people to perform about how they're supportive, how they're anti-racist. And so I think it's very, very difficult for young people in particular to do that policing. Yeah, it's being aware. If you're aware of the need for self-care, it's great, but it's so insidious. Racism is so insidious, and it's self-perpetuating because it's so clever, because it changes its guise, it evolves. And I think, you know, there is an issue and a conversation to be had about how do we police and protect one another within the context of social media, to protect one another's emotional and it's physical as well as emotional well-being, because what happens in your head happens in your body. So, you know, how do we do that? How do we separate? Because if you're as an activist, you actually make a choice to engage in something. But when it's on your threads, when it just pops up, when you're looking, how do you then step back from that? Because people aren't going to put trigger warnings on. It's just a part. And I think that's something that we have to be very mindful, and it's very important to have conversations about the impact that it will have on our physical and emotional well-being.
It's a very good point. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything to that.
The only thing I was going to add is, I mean, completely agree. And I think that there are times when people who, even in a well-meaning way, feel as though they're being supportive or helpful by sharing content, by sharing video recordings. Again, I'm especially thinking about since last spring, or even if it's organisations reaching out, as they'll say, to different Black people to speak up about something or to feature on something. And oftentimes, again, they're actually wanting them to be in dialogue with somebody who's going to be essentially attacking them. So yeah, I think we have seen the ways that organisations and individuals, even those who think they are expressing some sort of allyship, actually circulating material that can be incredibly re-traumatizing for Black people. And I think, again, this maybe comes back to some of what we've all been saying about to do with visibility. This is never just about visibility or surface level representation. It's about so much more than that. And I'm just hopeful that we see people thinking twice before just retweeting something or taking a beat to reflect on, do I really need to be sending this to a Black person I know, when the reality is they'll be all too aware of this anti-Blackness and that somebody perhaps is now only waking up to.
Yeah, I agree. And my worry is that we'll become desensitized to quite traumatic posts that we shouldn't actually be seeing. So, for example, the George Floyd video, I have not watched that video from beginning to end because I never needed to watch that video. And I knew I never needed to see it. I knew what had happened. I knew what was going to happen when I saw it. And I said, I never need to watch that. And I should never watch that. I just knew that I never needed to watch it. So that was one of the days when I was like, right, I'm off social media for the day. The Euro 2020 was another, but I think there is a trend of well-meaning. Usually I get the most graphic racist posts from well-meaning people who tag me in it or go, have you seen this? And I'm like, yeah, 50 people have sent it to me today. So I think we need to understand that to fight racism doesn't mean that we should be okay with seeing quite graphic racism as normal on our news feeds, because that's not okay. And as the person in the audience has said, as activists, there's a level of us understanding that we will see that, but then young people and people who aren't engaged in activism, how do they protect themselves? And I think social media companies do need to step up, because if I write COVIDs on a post, even if it's just to tell people I've got COVID, I get a COVID warning, like covering my posts. Yet someone can post the M word, someone can post, a Black person being harmed on social media. There's no cover, there's no, warning, nothing comes up on that. So I think it's a bit poor for them to come to us and say, oh, there's nothing we can really do, when we know there's quite a lot that they can do, and we know there's a lot more that they can be doing to be protecting people from graphic racism. But it's the whole chicken versus egg scenario, because there are people who will argue that without that George Floyd video circulating, we would never have got the result that we got in court. We would never have had the BLM movement. But I don't think society should be going to a place where we have to see graphic racism and violence in order to be able to fight it.
I did the same thing as well with George Floyd. With George Floyd, with the video, I didn't watch it for quite a while. With me, Lena, who's also in the audience, conducted a Zooms around what happened, and it was through I got an idea of what happened more so from what people said, and from the Zooms and things like that. And then I watched it a few weeks after everything had already happened. But yeah, that was actually one of my worries too, is like with a lot of with being able to just view like graphic scenes. I didn't want to I never want to reach the point where like I feel like I've become desensitized to anything. So yeah.
Do you think, I mean, part of me wants to wrap things up, but there's a thought that's just occurred to me while you two were talking, and it's about the normalization of violence, and also an expectation that violence can be enacted on Black bodies, and that there's an expectation to see violence being enacted on Black bodies. And how do you denormalize it? How do you, if you don't show it, that's one thing, but the point is it's still happening. So to some extent, people need to know that it's happening. And so how do you break down that sort of catch-22 by sort of making it known but not necessarily sensationalizing it or normalizing it to such an extent that you expect it.
It's very, very difficult. I mean, I don't, because you want to see. It's really important that we're communicating all this stuff, but then, how are we going to act on it? It's really, I think we're all put in this precarious situation all the time. I mean, on the phone, I get things on the phone, have you seen this? This guy said that, somebody said the N-word to this. And you just feel, oh my God, how much more stuff? I want to know, but then, you know what I mean? I don't want to disregard it either. It's really difficult.
I think one of the things that Chantal was saying there as well is like one of the ways of this obviously I don't think there's one good way of dealing with it, but the idea of when Chantal mentioned that there's got if you type in anything to do with COVID, a COVID alert pops up, there should be those sort of like those sort of things happening with things around racism and the like, it gives you like a warning. I know that back I don't know when it was, but they had a shooting their kid in America a couple of years ago where somebody went and I think he went to a mosque and shot up a lot of people. In New Zealand, that was in New Zealand, but they also had another one that happened. I'm conflating two different stories, but they had another one that happened in America as well, where they shot where somebody was going around killing people, and they blared the video, and they said like they gave you the trigger warning saying that there's going to be it's got graphic violence in it. So it's just like having those sort of things is one way, I suppose, of that I think that social media needs to put in place.
But how would that happen? I mean, it's going to need somebody for that to be implemented. Like we get, there's a thing on children on the BBC have it, all the time. How do we get that to happen? And who's going to do it?
I think sorry.
Question and then question. Sorry, and carry on.
Add to that, I think there's definitely a bias in the media towards Black bodies, and there's a push from the media. They're okay with seeing Black bodies harmed, but if it was, someone of another race, then there's not so much. There's more of like that blaring or that censoring of that violence being shown. And I think it's something that, as activists, we need to change that kind of narrative, because it's very against Black people all the time. That's all I was going to add.
I'm a portrait and documentary photographer, and I do a lot of my activism through my artwork as well, particularly for women and queer communities, because that's my communities. But on Instagram and Facebook and stuff, I've had images removed with women's nipples and things like this. So, Instagram has the power to do these things that they choose not to, and they choose to penalize women's bodies, Black bodies, fat bodies, and all of these communities are being controlled and censored. So I kind of relate to that from a different point of view as you, but for the same reason. And it's so frustrating that these platforms are being, this is where we put up our work. And then when you're being censored like that, it's really difficult to reach kind of other people. And it's only happened to me a couple of times, but I know it's happened to like a lot of my peers. I think it's right that if they can flag COVID or they can take down a female, they somehow know the difference between a female nipple and a male nipple. Why can't they put up, there's no difference, but how somehow Instagram knows that they can't do more to support oppressed communities.
But who's going to put the pressure or, get that implement? This is my thing. How do we get that? I entirely agree with you, and it needs to change. So we're not having all these flags coming up, and we do have we have the warnings coming up, to inform us. But how do we get that implemented?
We've got a follow-up.
It's another form of racism, isn't it? It's the way in which it morphs, and it's part of the educational process. That all these well-meaning people that post and share information that causes us trauma, that's part of their education. It's an ongoing process that it's not okay. You know, I was 40 years old before I had my first mobile phone, and I didn't have a smartphone until I was almost 50. And I managed to be an activist, I managed to be aware, and I managed to be educated. So it's, you know, and I know it's a way of putting the genie back in the bottle, but communities we have to teach people how we want to be treated. It's not okay. It's not okay to do this. It's another form of racism. And that's what another battle. So when I was saying earlier that it constantly evolves and it morphs, this is just another example of it. And so, you know, it's part of the ongoing fight and the struggle, but it's just something else that we have to deal with. And if people, you know, want to learn and they want to be, and I hate the term ally, if they want to be supportive and working alongside educating themselves and others, then that's part of the message that is given. It's changing the narrative, it's controlling the narrative, and not just going along with what, you know, the people, because it's all about power. And when you get people to recognize that the power balance and the dynamics that they're perpetuating, and we're all culpable, you know, we all have to recognize what we do to maintain and to dismantle the power balances. It's all part of that educational process. And yeah, we've got to see it as an us problem, not a them. It's not about getting other people to change. We've got to change. We've got to get other people to change their work. It's not about getting Google to do it, or, you know, major organizations. If it's a grassroots upwards process, this is not okay. I put messages out on my social media and said, you know, please bear in mind the impact this has on people from the Black community. If we all do that, then people will stop sending us stuff. And eventually, and it might not be the solution, because it will morph and it will come out another way. But to deal with that immediate problem, that's an option.
Francesca, you were going to...
Sure, I was just going to say a few things in response. I completely agree. I think even the fact that often Black people are referred to or viewed as Black bodies as opposed to people is an issue. And in terms of how this connects to education, I think there's a normalization of, you know, well, first of all, the lack of Black history that's taught across Britain is a whole thing in and of itself. But there's also a normalization of, you know, images in textbooks at schools when they do depict or engage with, you know, the experiences of Black people. Those are often very violent images. So like has been said, this isn't just about tech. I think there's a normalization in terms of content that is traumatic for Black people to have to be confronted with. And I think the expectation that these videos have to exist for Black people to be believed is part of the problem. That is anti-Blackness. There are many other experiences that happen whereby people would not be expecting a video to be provided, and actually they would say the existence of that video in and of itself could actually constitute a criminal act. But somehow when we're dealing with anti-Blackness, people say, I need to see a video that's going to traumatize many Black people in order to even entertain the possibility that this happened. So it was just to agree with all of what's been said, and to say, although the solution is not, you know, the solution does not lie with tech, I do think that more can be done. Content moderation is a thing, and as has been covered, you're more likely to find that a Black person is censored online than content that is traumatic for a Black person to come across is actually moderated in the way that it can and should be. So tech isn't the answer, but I also don't think we should let them off the hook when we see that content moderation and censorship occurs, just not when it comes to addressing anti-Blackness.
Very quickly, just because I feel like we've been in a dark room for quite some time now, want to say, obviously what's happened clearly from our conversation is that the nature of protest and the nature in which communities organize and pull together to campaign, to challenge the system, to kind of question the structures of power and the systems with which power is exerted have been radically transformed by technology and social media, but the very nature of protest itself has changed. So what we've seen over the last 10 years, culminating last summer, with the Black Lives Matter movement was that the protest itself looks very different to how it did 10 years ago. It's less about the sort of, the anger comes out in a different way. The anger and the outrage that this is still, that these conditions still perpetuate, come out in very different ways, and that there's a different sort of impetus to how the power systems are being addressed. And I feel like there's still evidently a huge amount of work still to be done. I feel like that's all we can say, really.
Yeah. But to put on the positive note, a lot of great stuff has been done too. So we just got to just continue the work, and continue spreading the word and making sure that people also themselves make sure that they go out and become educated. Yeah.
Just final comments from the panel, and then I think we're going to wrap up. If there's anything else you're burning to say right now.
Yeah, I agree with Blue here. I mean, it's been a long time coming, as the song says, but we have seen some changes. It's not all hunky-dory, but there's little inroads, and in particular since BLM, that's helped us again. That's given us another thrust, and helped us to realize, yes, things still need to move on. So I'm happy with some of the things that's happened, but I fully understand we've still got a long road to travel.
Yeah, I just think if we look at Liverpool, look at the last couple of years, we've got our first Black MP, we've got our first Black mayor. We're getting there bit by bit, but I think anti-racism is a bit like a relay race. We have to pass the baton and just keep on pushing forward until we get there. So we're the kind of next generation, but we've got to keep there with the generation that came before us, keep learning from them and keep pushing so that one day we don't have to pass back, because we've done it, we've got there.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I think B, Blue and Chantal all said it best. It's never just about the digital, it's about different types of action, and also being aware that not everybody does have access to the internet, to a digital device, and the work that you're all doing is so phenomenal, because it's never just about one or the other.
Amazing. I just thank you so much, everyone, for being here, but especially to B, Blue, Chantal and Francesca for your insight and your absolutely amazing work that you're doing out there in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So for those of you who haven't tried it yet, go outside. There's a poster on the front of the building which has got the QR code for Uprisings, which is BAF's project. And if you're free in a couple of hours' time, we will be having a closing party for our exhibition at the moment, which features Black Obsidian sound system in our Gallery 1, and upstairs we've got the artist Sheng Bo. It's part of the Liverpool Biennial, but we've got Sable Sound System, who are from Leeds, basically having a closing party. So we will be having some DJ sets and drinks in the galleries. So stick around. That's it. That's from 6 o'clock. And it's a little street party. Well, I say street party, I'm not sure we're allowed to have a street party, but we're having a street party. Please edit this out. All right, thanks.